It's my space. No, it's not. It's your space. No, it's not. It's weird space. No, it's not.
What?
It's third space.
Third space. Yeah, you
Third space.
threw me. I thought third space was going to be the third
And
line.
yeah, I like to
So,
make it fourth because it's third space.
man, you're just on it with the openings.
Yeah, man, I've nailed it.
Yeah, I think you've got a future in music if the teaching, if the robots take over teaching.
I'll just turn to jingle writing.
Yeah, I think you can do it. Hey, I've got a question for you. I was walking around the lake recently, and someone rode past me on a bike, and the bike had really fat tires. Have you seen these fat tire bikes?
Yeah, I assume they are intended to like drive on the beach.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Like, what's the point of the fat tires? This trail around the lake is paved, and I don't live near the beach. So, what is the genuine purpose of the fat tire bikes?
My assumption is it's some sort of traction. Obviously, bigger, more contact with the ground, better traction. Also, harder to pedal, more wear on your tires, maybe even a rougher ride, and more stability, I guess. But you'll hit more rocks. You know what I mean? Like you can weather a rock better, but you're gonna hit more of them if it's triple the length of like a really really skinny like cyclist's bike wheel. I mean, I'm talking about it, but I had no idea. But I really think it's for beach riding mainly. Like I see them at the beach a lot, and I know it's almost impossible to ride a bike at the beach.
Yeah,
So-
but is there a cool factor to it? Like, is that the new, like, you know how we used to when we were kids, we used to put pegs on our bikes?
Yeah. Put
And-
a baseball card in the Stokes.
Well, the Stokes, just stoking up that coolness.
Stoking.
Is it like that? Because, like I say, this was a paved path. We're nowhere near the beach, and this was, some teenage kid or something riding his fat tire bike. And, like, the reason I ask is because, everything has pros and cons. The con for this is obviously that it looks really stupid, and I don't know what the pro is. Like you say, riding on sand, that's a legitimate pro, but there's no sand around, so I'm trying to figure out what's the deal here.
There's no doubt that like it's probably trendy too, right? Like maybe it is an increasing trend. I probably have bias like because I see it near a beach and that just fits, right? Like it makes sense to go ahead and have. So you might have more bikes with fat tires here, but now if it trends and goes like nationwide, then you have people in like Wisconsin or something with these bikes. It's like why? So. No, there's no reason other than it could look pretty cool. It seems like it would look a little bit tougher, right? Like the whole bike has an impression of being thicker and
I don't know.
stronger.
It looks goofy to me. It looks like a kid's toy when I see the fat tires on the bikes. Like, I imagine a giant baby hand coming down and grabbing him and being like, vroom, vroom, vroom. And that's what I see. Every time I see it, I'm like, a baby's about to grab you. Whereas when I see the skinny tire bikes, they seem sleek. Like you're going to see someone hunched over on them, like zooming around.
Right.
That's
with
what
their
I
back
think.
kind of straight, and they have
Yeah.
colorful like tight clothes and they wear a helmet.
Yeah, those guys.
Yeah.
And you know my feeling on those guys. But what I will say in their defense is that their bikes look cooler than the fat tire bikes. If the guys riding around in front of my car on the road had fat tires, I don't know if I could keep my cool, man. I don't know.
With all the popular beers have also been trendy and there's
right.
a fat
That's
tire
true.
beer. So
Yeah, no one drinks skinny tire beer.
Right.
Or like racing bike beer.
they drink Skinny Cow, which is or maybe that's the ice cream, and there's like Skinny Girl vodka and stuff, but that's more feminine. So yeah, the fat tire, manly. It's just a manly
Yeah.
thing to do. Is have a fat
Ma-
tire.
Maybe this 12-year-old was he got this bike after his good experience with fat tire beer.
Probably so. Probably so. Well, problem solved. Now we know.
Now we know. Learn something new all the time. All right, so hey, how about we kick things off with Mind Your Morals?
I like it. I like moral conundrums and ethical
Been
situations.
a couple episodes since we've done Mind Your Morals. Seems to be kind of interesting. So, just to remind all of our dozen listeners.
Yeah.
Actually, I think we are nearing 200 downloads. So
woohoo! We should get ourselves a trophy.
I know. Anyway, to remind people of what Mind Your Morals is, it's very simple. I present a mild, medium, or spicy moral dilemma. Maybe it's not a dilemma, it's just an ethical situation, and we talk about it really, really simple. You try to decide, what's the right thing to do, what's the wrong thing to do, and try to reason through both the pros and cons, maybe, or if something is a binary choice, you try to rationalize both sides of it. So.
I like this because it's basically like practicing life. They're thought experiments, but like how do we operate,
Yeah.
Like what are our principles? What do we do in this situation? And it's good to sort of, even in teaching, we will act things out to see what would you do if a student did this? What's the proper way to do this? And what are the consequences? And the best way to do it is to sort of play itself out. Okay, if I did this, then what would happen? And that's I see this as a similar situation.
Yeah, sure. And, it has all the drawbacks that hypothetical situations have. We can't trust 100% that you would do what you say you would do. But it's still an interesting thought experiment, and hopefully the ones that I've chosen are either they're things you haven't thought about, or they're silly enough that, we'll be able to get some of your honest opinion in there.
Right.
So we'll see. So without further ado, the first of Mind Your Morals is a mild. I've got a very mild one for us this time.
Okay.
So you are on a work trip to another city, and it just so happens that a former coworker of yours lives in this city. So you're staying with them for the weekend. It's a former coworker. You're not super close, but it's also not a stranger. They only have one bathroom in their apartment. So you're there and you're taking a shower. You get out of the shower and you accidentally knock over their entire stack of clean towels on the bathroom floor.
No.
Yeah. And the floor, you look at the floor, it's just kind of near the toilet. It's not obviously dirty. It's not like hair and stuff everywhere, but it's not freshly cleaned either.
Right.
So the question is, what do you do about this situation?
The two obvious paths here are just put the towels back or tell them you messed all their towels up. I'm assuming the towels, they spilled in an array and got, equally... you could examine the towel and say, can I pick up the spare hairs? Can I pick them off really quickly? No harm, no foul kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
And then part of it is sort of how clean... All right, I'll tell you what my knee-jerk is. I would try to clean it up as perfectly as possible. I would evaluate how good it looks afterward, and I would tell them regardless, in sort of a really embarrassed, way too hard on myself fashion, in order to promote sympathy. Like, oh, he's being honest. Thank you for being honest. And that's silly. You're taking it way too hard, to where they almost feel like they are soothing me.
Right.
That's the manipulator in me, right? And so
Sure.
and that way they are too busy, distracted, making me feel better than to be upset with me. And I've been honest and forthcoming, and I've corrected the situation as much as possible. That way, if they looked and evaluated, they kind of can make a judgment. They get to say, oh, it's not a big deal, and look, you already put it together, it looks fine. And then they made the call knowing. Or they get to go, no, I'm kind of a clean freak and that's gross. Or yesterday I pooped on the floor and got it up, but I'm not sure how clean it was, so I'm going to go ahead and throw those and bleach them or something. So,
Right.
that I feel like that's the situation. I would proceed like that, and I would have covered my entire basis. I would have done the work. Like, there's no one that's going to say, like, oh, well, Daniel was lazy in this situation where he just didn't want to, like, I did the work. Because I would feel bad, by the way. Like, I would just feel bad that I did that. So how do I rectify it as much as possible? Yeah.
So let me tweak the scenario just a little bit. Let's say that you're staying with this coworker, and for whatever reason they have to go to work on this day, but this is a day that you have completely off on your work trip. Maybe it's the Sunday before your work trip really gets started. They're gone somewhere, so you actually have the entire day. And you take a shower in the morning and knock the towels over. So, you could, pick the hairs off, fold them back up, and put them back on the shelf, planning to tell them later. Or you could wash them. The washer and dryer are there and available. you could wash the towels and completely rectify the situation. Is that an option you would consider, or is that taking it one step too far?
I honestly wouldn't, because I feel like this presents sort of a comedy of errors situation where I mess up their washer and dryer that happened to be on the fritz and I didn't know, or I use some expensive, detergent, or maybe I grabbed their grandma's urn next to it instead of the detergent. Just some stupid thing would happen, or like they could be rightfully annoyed if they're not they don't worry about cleanliness, and they're like, dang it, that's a whole thing of towels now. You've used there's almost something intimate about using all of the things involved. And so I think that's a little bit of an invasive call in a weird way.
It's a less moral. Your proposed action is the most moral course of action in your opinion.
According to me, yes.
According to you,
I think to do that could be a little bit invasive. I've now gone into their laundry room. I've dug around for their stuff. I've fiddled with their.
Maybe you open the dryer and all their underwear is in there. And what do I do with this?
I mean, there's a lot of risk involved as soon as you go out to do that. I might even call them and say, "Hey, I'm willing to do laundry." I feel like it's unlikely for them to say, "Yeah, go ahead and do the laundry." Like they'd have to almost. That's just a strange. Even if they're annoyed and would prefer I do it, I feel like the average person would say, "No, don't worry about it," kind of thing. But I would do everything I could to gauge. And maybe even if I sensed that they were super annoyed, buy them a drink later or an additional sort of thank you for letting me stay here. I probably would have bought them a drink anyway, or whatever sort of social nicety it would call for, right? That you've let me stay here. Not only did I infringe upon, or not only did I, what's the word I'm looking for? Not infringe upon your.
I took advantage of your hospitality.
Yeah, you've extended your hospitality, and so in some ways, I want to thank you for that. And I messed up your towels in some very mild way. I sullied them slightly.
Sullied your towels.
So I just feel like, I feel like my position. I mean, if I think it actually ups the game if you said it was a pretty dirty floor, and when I picked it up there was dust and hairs, but also a little mystery liquid, and it clearly isn't quite right to just put them back. That makes it a little more, well, what do I do? I might insist I do their laundry or something. I don't know, but I would tell them before. I would not just go about doing it and say surprise, because I find that would annoy me.
I tell you the reason I worded it like this. The floor isn't obviously dirty, but neither is it freshly clean. And that's because of a tick of mine, which is in the bathroom. The bathroom floor is, to me, when it comes to cleanliness, there are just inherently dirty areas where if you mess around with this area, you're now dirty and you got to clean yourself, and the bathroom floor is one of those. If you drop something on the bathroom floor, it's dirty. It doesn't matter what it is, how long it was there. If it's on the bathroom floor, it's unusable now. Same thing if you drop the soap on the floor of the tub.
That's what I was going to ask.
I hate that. Absolutely hate it.
Do you use bar soap?
Yeah, I use bar soap.
I'm sure you drop it on occasion, right?
Yeah, I drop it on occasion, and if it's on its last legs, throw it in the trash, and I get a fresh bar of soap. If it's a brand new bar, there's still plenty of soap on there, then I'm mad, and I'm like, figures, this is going to be one of those days where I drop the soap on the floor. But then I vigorously rub it under the water until I imagine the whole outer layer of soap is gone, and that's enough to appease my annoyance.
I'm sure that's accurate. I mean, it is
floor.
a soap layers would go away pretty quickly. You'd actually have completely fresh soap.
Right. Yeah, that's how I imagine it is, and it seems reasonable. It's reasonable enough to convince my brain that it's okay. But if I drop my own towels on the bathroom floor next to my toilet, which I'm completely aware of the cleanliness of my bathroom because I'm the only one that uses it. But even if I did that, I would be like, these towels I can't use these anymore. I have to wash these. And so even if it's not obviously dirty, that's the thing, the bathroom floor dirtiness it's an invisible kind of dirtiness.
Yeah,
And
I'm trying to
maybe
determine, are you idiosyncratic? Is that really weird, or would a lot of people agree with you? Because, I mean, I tend to agree that's a little bit grosser of an area, but if I knocked a stack of towels over and I could just kind of knock them off and they were still fairly neatly folded realistically, right? Like, it's not
yeah.
like they just went to hell and back for no reason. Like, so I just don't think I'd give it much of a thought unless I saw a bunch of little hairs, and I don't know. I just don't think I give it much of a thought. And I'm a pretty clean guy, so I don't know.
So, what would you, if you had to assess the morality of actions here? What would be the morality of if you knock these towels over and they fell kind of next to the toilet and you just leave them there? Like they towels fall where they may, and you're just like, oh dang, I knocked these over. No matter what, I'm not washing these things because I'll grab grandma's urn. They're already dirty. I don't know how dirty. I'll let them decide. I'll leave the towels here. Like, assess the morality of that situation?
And do you tell do you tell the owner, not the owner, why I can't
Host?
think of words today, host? Yeah, jeez.
Your coworker, yeah.
Yeah, do I tell them too and say, hey, I knocked the towels over, sorry about that?
I don't
Or are
know.
you just
What do
saying I just
yeah,
don't? I think the least moral thing you could do is knock them over, not tell the owner, and maybe
Right,
even
yeah.
deny it if they say, "Hey, what happened?"
Well,
in there?
okay, so
What? I don't know.
I mean, I think it may be up for debate. Is the least moral thing to knock the towels over and just leave them there, not say anything about it? That's obviously not the action I would take, but it could be argued that the second least, or maybe a competitor for least moral thing to do, is to knock them on the ground. They are now dirty, to some varying degree, and then you fold them up nicely, put them back on the shelf, and don't say anything. And like now, they will never know that this happened, and they may have contaminated towels. And in the other situation, they have contaminated towels, and they know, and you were careless.
Right. But I would assume the presumption of goodwill would say like that you thought you rectified the situation, because I could see a lot of people just doing it and thinking they've rectified it. It's perfect now. It's fine. I put the towels back. They didn't think about contamination, and they just thought, okay, like that's a very realistic scenario to me. And so I'm not that. Then they're not morally to blame, although you can say that they are maybe ignorant or maybe not thoughtful, but they're not. There's no moral gray area there.
So is this the same situation when someone gets in a car accident and you're supposed to not move them, not move their head or their body or whatever? You're supposed to leave them there until the emergency personnel arrive.
And if the person who's trying to help moves them and makes it worse,
Yeah.
they're not. I don't think they're morally at fault at all. I mean, they're just trying to help. If someone's trying to help, then you're not morally at fault.
Right.
I mean, you get into like. I mean, they're acting out of ignorance, and that is dangerous and that is tragic. But I don't think it's morally weak of them or a character flaw. You could say it's a character flaw, I suppose. Like ignorance can be a character flaw. At some point, but I don't think yet. I don't think it's a moral flaw. It could be just a stupidity thing. And does that make sense? Like I just don't see it as a moral issue then.
No, that makes sense. I'm agreeing with most of your analysis on this.
I just think
moral situation.
Are you the biggest jerk knows their host well enough to say like, ugh, they're so uptight they'd want to redo the laundry, and I'm making the judgment call that that's not necessary. I'm not going to tell them, and I'm going to get some sort of pleasure by knowing that they, because I'm insisting my values take precedence. Like they need to get over being a germaphobe. They are uptight and ridiculous, and then I just kind of grin as they use that towel that is infected now, and like that's immoral.
Right. That's also why I presented the scenario as a former coworker. You don't have close ties, but they're not a stranger. I tried to kind of put it in the middle so that
right. You're not uncomfortable,
uncertainty.
but you don't have but you don't know well enough. Yeah.
Yeah. So. That's good. I think we analyzed that one pretty well.
I
gave you the worst case scenario, and like I think taking them to the wash is like that's potentially the like if you are going to make it as if the incident never happened, that's your way to do it. But like you say, it comes with risks. So
yeah.
I've got another one for you, and this time I'm going to kick it up to a spicy level.
Ooh, mild straight to spicy. Skipping
That's
medium
right.
altogether.
Skip a medium this time. So this is kind of a prerequisite, but we have to get your position on this before we can move forwards. So you're asleep in bed, and you hear a crash coming from your living room. So you grab a handgun that you keep on by your bedside. You do have one in this scenario. And you enter your living room and you find a large man in black clothing. He's looking through your belongings. And he looks up and sees you and he starts advancing towards you. So are you justified in shooting him?
I mean, you're getting very close to me saying yes. Are you... I would definitely not just start pulling the trigger. I would pull the gun. I would be like, I'm about to shoot. So I think to just start firing at that point, he's advancing. You didn't say
he's advancing, arms out, like he is aggressively coming at you.
I mean, if it's fast and I might be saying like stop, and then assuming like I have. So. Yes, very possibly. So, I mean, we're about is like he's not stopping. He's not showing any signs of slowing down. As I'm yelling, I'll shoot or whatever. Then I would, and I would. I'm torn about like I'm pretty ignorant about guns and don't even have that strong of an opinion. But I don't want to kill someone. I wouldn't want to stop him. So
Sure.
I just try to stop him, and yes, pulling the trigger for sure. I don't know if I'd be going for like a headshot and like just make sure he's dead before, I don't know. I wouldn't do that. I think I would just try to stop him with everything I've got to incapacitate him. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So that's the establishing that I just had to ask that to establish for what I think is the real interesting moral question. But so. That's good. If you answered no, then the whole thing would be pointless. I think that given the laws in this country, most people would answer yes to that question. That's one of the purposes of being able to have a weapon is
right.
to protect yourself. So,
and I'm not, but the whole mind your morals thing too is that I'm not particularly interested in that situation about whether I would be like sued afterward or not or whatever. I just would be thinking like, what is the moral thing? The higher than what is the law, or what's the law let me get away? To me, it's like, anyway, I just wanted to be
but there's
clear.
Some rough correlation between morality and law. I mean, especially when it comes to when you can kill another person. I mean, we do legislate morality in a certain way. So, and this is one of those instances.
I think it's impossible to avoid legislating morality. Each law is a sort of moral code in some way. And you're right. I just and obviously the fact that we have guns, and in this situation the gun is presumably to protect, and I have it there as a protective device, and I'm being violated in some way, and like my safety is in violation, so I utilize the protective weapon that I have. So yeah,
the prereq is not a gotcha. It's a clear self-defense home invasion situation. Right. So gotcha. No gotcha there. Okay. But here's the twist on the situation. So now imagine, and this may be a stretch, now imagine that you're a scientist and you work with advanced laser technology. It's meant to be used in industrial mining.
None of those lazy lasers. These are advanced lasers.
These are advanced lasers. And so you have been working on this early prototype laser for mining. It's the prototype itself is about, it's a handheld box. It's about the size of a cereal box. When you activate it, it emits an invisible laser from the front of it. It's just a prototype. So you can't actually mine anything or burn anything or blind anyone. It doesn't shoot a visible laser, so it's not like Star Wars or anything like that.
Okay.
But exposure to the laser beam causes rapid development of severe cancer. When I say rapid, I'm talking maybe over the course of 2 weeks. So okay. It's not instantaneous, but like.
Do you mean if you got hit with it in 2 weeks, you would have cancer, or do you mean if I were to have the beam on someone for 2 weeks, they would have cancer?
I mean, if you get hit with it at all, then in 2 weeks you will have developed severe cancer.
Okay, got it.
So anyway, you had brought this prototype home to work on it over the weekend. While asleep, you hear the crash. In this scenario, you don't have a handgun anymore, or any other weapon. So, but you have the prototype laser sitting on your desk right there. Are you justified in using the cancer laser on the robber?
Well, I mean, so now the scenario has changed because it doesn't sound like it would deter him. He might not even know what would happen, right? So as far as like usefulness of the situation, not very useful. But that's not your question. The question is, are you justified in it, right? Like,
Right.
So if I'm trying to make myself safe, then this makes no sense. But am I justified? Because I mean, surely, like, I'm in immediate danger. I'm being threatened. I'm gonna grab a baseball bat. I'm gonna grab something as he's advancing, because this isn't gonna stop his advancement. So
No.
I don't. I'm sorry. I'm hung up on the fact that like.
That's true. You, in terms of, I mean, unless you can somehow convey to him that this is a deadly box you're holding, which is, let's be real, this Robert, if you say, hey, look, I'm a scientist, this is advanced prototype laser technology, like, you're not going to be able to convince him of that. This looks like a...
Yeah. Well, what if I
box.
was I don't want to change your scenario because I will address it, but I'm thinking like, so this guy's like robbed your car and you've called the cops and they're always late and they don't do anything, but I see him doing it every time, but I'm scared to confront him because he's big or whatever. What if I just beamed him with it, like
stealthily?
Yeah. But
Yeah.
the scenario has now
difference.
changed because I'm not threatened. So anyway,
Right. So we can analyze. That's interesting. We can analyze that scenario, but let's stick with this one first.
In this situation, I'm still trying. Do you mind if I press a little further? Like, why the heck would I use that beam in this scenario? Like, it's not saving me. It's not doing anything other than, haha, in 2 weeks you're gonna pay. Justice will be served, or some sort of version of justice will be served. So
I mean, that's a consideration. I mean, look, the idea is you in our system of law, and I think in most people's governing morality, you're justified in using lethal force if you are under threat of danger or if someone is invading your property.
Right.
And this, if you have a handgun, it's immediate lethal force. If
Right.
you have a cancer laser, it's not immediate lethal force, but it's still lethal force. And the question is, if you're justified in using lethal force, what's the difference of the time frame?
Delayed lethal force.
Right.
Because there is something about me saying, well, the lethal force it's all about immediacy to me. Like, the reason you had to use lethal force is to immediately stop it. So I guess I really am getting at the core of the issue, because now I'm using a lethal force, but the immediacy isn't there. It's not actually preventing him from, inflicting harm upon me in that moment. So therefore, I'm, the lethality of it. Like, the lethality is only because it had to be so fierce because of the immediacy, because it was such a pressing, it was literally a dire moment. And that's why I think the laws have unfolded the way they have, because there was no other option. And in this case, it almost doesn't even make sense to do it. And since there were tons of other options, and since killing someone is a major, it's one of the most grand things you could do morally, like questionable things like death and taking someone's life into your own hands. So I don't view this as a moral thing to do. Although I could maybe sympathize with some a-hole gets what's coming to him. I think there's a part of everyone in their spirit that goes, yeah, you shouldn't be doing that. You put yourself in a position and you got burned. But at the same time, no, I just don't think I could go get behind death that wasn't necessary because it didn't do anything in that moment. Even if it balanced the scales, so to speak, even if we could quantify a life as worth X amount of theft, let's just assume a huge assumption we could do that for a second. It's just that's the delay, man. It's not immediate, so it's not as necessary. It's not as pressing. So therefore it's immoral. Okay.
I tend to agree with that analysis. And I also think you're completely right in the fact that the threat of danger to yourself is what justifies the use of lethal force. It's not theft. If someone, I think actually I'm not a lawyer, but I think it actually is if someone steals something from you and then is running away and you're no longer under threat of danger, you can't shoot at them while they're running down the street away, with your DVD player or something,
right?
With your grandma's urn. Get back here with my grandma.
No, but yeah, and I tend to think that that's immoral at that point. I mean, like, look, if if you said, "Oh, I was shooting at their leg to
You can't do
incapacitate
that's.
them,"
I don't
but
think
like
that holds up.
it's too. No, yeah, like what do you
When
too gray, too
I'm
weird.
pretty sure that in the eyes of the law, if you aim a gun at someone and pull the trigger, it doesn't matter if you're shooting for their leg or their foot. It doesn't matter if you're aiming a gun at someone, you're willing to kill them. So it's kind of irrelevant what part of them you were aiming for.
I think that's just the best way to legislate because I mean you're pointing something lethal at someone and you're pulling the lethal gun, the lethal weapon trigger. So,
right.
Yeah.
So I tend to agree with your moral assessment there. I have a tweak on the situation that I just thought of, but before I move to the tweak, like so you've given me your rationale, but is it immoral to use the cancer laser on the robber? Like, is this a morally reprehensible act, or is it just something you would not do?
I do think it's morally reprehensible because it didn't. Look, if you said the laser was strong enough to incapacitate them in the moment and then we'll kill them 2 weeks later, that's actually, now we're getting into if they're charging at me and I had to incapacitate them, and yeah, it's going to be 2 weeks of misery, and then they, die or at least have some terminal cancer. Look, I mean, I had to incapacitate them. They were threatening me. That's fine. But yeah, I think it's immoral to say, you were stealing from me. I didn't stop you, but like, what are you? You're trying to take justice into your own hands, and I'm uncomfortable with. I'm not uncomfortable with justice playing out outside of the law. I'm not, but I just feel firmly that a robbery and death are not equitable in any sense. It's just not.
So I thought of another tweak, actually. So my first tweak was what you mentioned. So imagine that now when you activate the laser, a blinding light comes out of it, and it truly blinding. So when you shoot the guy with the laser, he will be blind, and he will also get cancer in 2 weeks. So then you're saying it's justifiable because it will probably stop him.
It did something. The immediacy is back at play. It did something. Yeah.
So imagine that instead of just advancing towards you, with his hands out or whatever, like he's got a knife. You've got your box laser. It doesn't blind. It's the originally proposed cancer laser. He pulls out a knife. He's like advancing at you and stabbing you to the point, like he has already stabbed you a couple of times. This is going to be fatal for you. You're not making it out of this. Are you justified then in your last gasping moment of strength, can you activate the cancer laser as he's like, wiping off his fingerprints and grabbing your grandma's urn and leaving?
No, like, so he's leaving and you have it where you could basically hit him as he's walking out the door.
Yeah.
Like, the damage has been done. He's basically taken your life, or at least you're probably not 100% certain, but you're dying. You're sitting there dying. Then I think, you are. That's at least my knee jerk. I'll have to think this through.
Very interesting.
I'll have to think this through. But again, I am okay with justice occurring outside of the law, and he has just murdered you. And like, it's weird because if we got into death penalty stuff, I get a little more uncomfortable with death penalty than I do with a very, like, this is between two people. One came in and was killing the other, and the other one said, well, you're going down with me. And like, that just seems okay to me. Like, the reason it is justice, it is balanced. It's not only balanced, like you killed me and
I killed you. It's almost more balanced than letting the state come in.
Yeah, there's something messy about like this third party running it through a very convoluted system in which they then like, give you a shot or something and people watch you and it's like published. Like, it's just weird. Whereas this is I wouldn't even call it balanced though, because one was just minding their own business in their home and they got murdered, and in that act were able to inflict damage upon the other. So unjust still, but at least that plays out cleaner. And I think, look, it's not that I don't believe murderers deserve death. They may or may not. The reason I'm resistant, I'm even okay with saying they do, just for the sake of the argument. Let's say they do. I'm just uncomfortable with all the things I just listed, with a system that says I am confident enough to have the power to go kill people. Like I don't want a system to be able to, however systematized it is, however just it attempts to be. We're now like allowing a system to go out and kill people. And I use that as a neutral term. I didn't say murder, and I didn't say, execute. Like, I think the most neutral is just to say kill. A system has endowed the power upon itself to kill, and that makes me uncomfortable because it's, systems are flawed and all that, and killing is not reversible, and that's where I resist. I don't resist the idea that like some murderer deserves death. That seems okay by me, and that's why. If I'm being murdered and I can, can also take out my murderer, like I'm gonna do it. And I'm gonna do it without reservation. I'm not gonna think, you know what? As I hold the laser pointed at them, I will instead hope you find redemption in another way. Like, sorry, man. Like I don't get redemption here in this moment, and so you're going down with me. And maybe that's harsh on me. I don't know, but I'm pulling that laser trigger every time.
Okay, yeah. So actually, I think we align. Probably not surprising. We have a lot of similar outlooks. I tend to agree with that.
I want you to disagree with me.
I know, but I can't say I do this time. But I find this really interesting because, and I guess this speaks to the complexity of these kinds of situations. But
pretty spicy.
Pretty spicy, right? But
yeah.
like the difference in you using the cancer laser on this guy, like he's approaching you, you will not use it. He's like reaching his hands out to you, you will not use it. It takes him actually like murdering you before you will use it. Like you must be, like he has to go through with his act before you will react. And I mean, I guess that makes sense. Like that's morally consistent. It's just if the guy has murderous intent, if you only knew that, then you could get out of it without being murdered.
Right.
Maybe. Well, I guess actually you probably couldn't since it doesn't kill him immediately. So that's the thing.
It would, even if you apply it to our law, like someone who is threatening versus doing,
right.
It's just
True.
There's a huge difference. And then, so displaying tendencies, you get into a minority report situation where like, oh, now we have a very complex algorithm that says this person has done these things and there's 98% likelihood that they will do this crime. Well, then should we just go ahead and arrest them for it? And like society would be better off. But I feel like we're violating. There's some huge violation. Like we're arresting, and that's it playing out in a very physical, real way. Someone's coming at you. That's the threat. Although like, it's tragic to have to wait for someone to stab you to then do it. But I'm at least in this situation. Look, if they're coming at me and I can stop them in any way, yeah. But if they've already committed the deed and like, and I can just make them pay, then yeah, like I am. And I think I can even be consistent and hope they find redemption. I think you could say something like, well, I pray that they find some peace and forgiveness and somehow, but they also should die. Like I feel like that's fine and still consistent too. So
yeah, very interesting. That was actually one of the first situations I thought of when I was conceptualizing Mind Your Morals. And thought it was really an interesting situation. So, well reasoned. Yeah, I can't say I disagree with your take on that one.
It's hard not to talk about that sort of like fold in the death penalty, which I guess like is a sort of a more tired way of thinking about it. But I like.
Yeah, well, I don't really want to. I mean, I do find the death penalty an interesting topic, and you actually, when you're talking about that subject, you rope in the idea of war. When is killing someone else justified from a societal level, from a nation level, but that's not a Mind Your Moral situation. I kind of want sillier or at least different kinds of situations,
or at least localized. That's more of like the morality of a giant institution or group of people versus like it's you in this moral situation and how do you operate within your sphere of influence, because it's so much bigger when you're sending groups off to battle.
And we are, let's be real about this. We are limited in our expertise on,
speak for yourself.
Yeah, right. Like, we can't really comment too much on that stuff. I think obviously we should be able to comment on that stuff, but we're not experts. Whereas this is a personal situation, and it's easier to assess your morals in the situation. So.
Yeah.
So very interesting. Thank you for sharing your morality.
You're welcome.
So actually, I have another topic that I want to discuss with you, and it's a psychologically based topic, so I guess it's semi-deep, but it's not quite as spicy as that, I guess. This isn't a mind your moral situation.
Does this get into a meat? Okay, so it's not a medium. Got it.
No, it's not mind your morals at all. But this is a concept that I know we've talked about, but it's been a long time, and it certainly hasn't been on the podcast. But it's this idea of when worlds collide. And what I mean when I say that is it's a situation that I think everyone has had, where you have a social circle, maybe it's your friends, your school friends, and then you have another social circle, maybe it's your coworkers, or maybe it's your family. And there are certain situations in life when those two worlds come together, and you have to interact simultaneously with these two different groups of people.
Right, we've all experienced that, because you have different roles and you behave certain ways with the different groups. And so how do you
navigate?
Harmonize that? Yeah.
And so really the root of what I want to talk about is the discomfort of worlds colliding. And so I want to know why that happens, and so maybe to kind of ground the situation, we can think of some examples that we've really had, or some hypothetical examples, and just to kind of get the idea across to people, and then we can try to analyze maybe why it's uncomfortable, or how strategies for how you would navigate these things.
Well, you got my brain racing for a second, because I think it's important first to acknowledge that we are individuals, but even within ourselves, we contain multitudes. There's a bunch of different versions of ourselves, and that it doesn't mean we're not harmonious or that we're lying. It just means that we play different roles.
I want to talk about that point.
Yeah, well, so to me, I wear many different hats. Like, I'm a teacher, and I'm a friend, and I'm a brother, and I'm a son, and all of these things. And so, although I can be 100% sincere in all of those things, I might say curse more with my friends than I do with my students. I mean, that's a pretty clear-cut difference, right? Or at least I might, if my friends curse, I might not say, hey, cut it out, versus with students, I'm going to act accordingly, because I'm playing a different role. And I don't think that makes me fake as a teacher. I think it means I'm working within the role that I exist in. And that might, my friends might tell jokes that I wouldn't tell at the family dinner, that sort of thing. So right. I am very comfortable. That always actually plagued me growing up. I always thought I must be my real self with my friends, I think is our natural inclination, right? Because our guards let down. We can maybe reveal secrets that we wouldn't want our parents to know, or something like that. So I always thought, okay, when am I the most real? Because you're a kid looking to discover yourself in the world, and so you want sincerity. It's why Holden Caulfield doesn't like phonies and fake, and the world's fake. Everyone's insincere, and you crave sincerity, and you feel that is with your friends. Meaning, you must be fake with your parents, or you must be fake in your job, or as a student, you're being so fake in class because that's not how you really talk. Whatever that means. Does that make sense? I can keep going. You can jump in, whatever.
That makes total sense. I'm 100% on board. I find it interesting that you initially say, when are you most comfortable, or maybe even when are you most sincere with your friends? I wonder if everyone would have that answer, or if some people would say, I'm most sincere with my family, and if that varies with age.
I'd like to know too, because here's the thing: is I have a very good relationship with my parents. I love them to death, and so it was actually difficult being, say, 14, 15, 16, whatever, where you're like telling dirty jokes with friends and whatever, and feeling like, oh, am I lying to my parents because I don't want them to know that I am telling dirty jokes or something.
It's not even explicit lies. It's just that like your behavior, the things you bring up, the things you comment on, and the way you comment on them is different in these two separate groups.
Yes.
So it's not even an explicit lie. It's just a difference in behavior.
And so my simplistic thought process when I was younger is that I'm being fake, and I must be being fake in one. Like there has to be the real me, and then any deviation is insincere or fake or lying or like. So I just had a sort of simple version of what is true because but that's really strange because I could be really sincere with my parents. I just am not telling dirty jokes, and I'm using the dirty joke thing too much. But I guess what I'm saying is like or I had friends that I talked about basketball a lot with, and then like I wouldn't talk with you about basketball because you don't care about basketball. And so even within friend groups, even within same age, but like it's like my. Like people have different interests and you hang. That's why you don't have just one relationship. You have to. They pull out different aspects of your personality and interests.
So one thing that came to mind while you're talking about this, and like we're really focusing down on dirty jokes and stuff when that's not the point, and you recognize that.
Yeah.
But what came to mind when you say that is, when I think about myself as a teenager, as in middle school and stuff, you say you felt most sincere or most comfortable around friends, and so you're telling some jokes and whatever. Which I think is natural and normal for a teenager to
an edgy teenager, right?
Be edgy and rebellious when you're away from your parents. It's totally normal. But when I think about myself, when I was in middle school, like I actually was kind of weird. I think because like I didn't curse, and when I try to think about the reasons why I didn't curse, I went to public school in middle school and everyone's cursing around me. And like, I actually experienced some pushback for not cursing. Some people, obviously they noticed, and it would have been socially easier had I just given in and started cursing to fit in. But I didn't do that. And I think, like thinking back on it now, I think maybe it was a harmony thing. Like, it would have felt like I'm not the same Bennett at school as I am at home, and it felt disharmonious. And so that was the reason why I didn't curse. I acted the same. I tried to act the same as I do when I'm at home.
Right. I actually think, so weirdly, like I cursed and you didn't curse for the same reasons. Is in this, we're searching out sincerity and harmony, and I was like, okay, well, my natural state must be that of a cursor. I must just want to curse. Instead of seeing it as just a social role and pressures, I saw it as like, I guess the most sincere version of myself curses, and that's why I'm insincere on my parents. And it was frustrating. And you were trying to say, well, then I'm not a cursor, and like I'll just be consistent. So we're really doing it for the same motivations, possibly. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if there's some nugget under here about each person's resistance to change, because I'm fairly resistant to change, and if my norm is not cursing, then when I enter a situation in which I'm pressured to curse, then I'm just resistant to that. I'm resistant to changing what I view as my sincere, harmonious self. And like I wonder if you're more open to change. I think based on our personalities, that makes sense.
It definitely makes sense, and I think I was just trying to fit in socially, and like it was a little bit. I have a whole thing on cursing, and I don't want to get stuck on it, but like it's safe rebellion, like you're cursing and that's taboo, but like how taboo is saying some words? I know words are important. I'm an English teacher, for crying out loud, but like you're not doing drugs, you're not sneaking out in the middle of the night, you're not putting yourself in like real danger. You've been told saying a word is bad, and so now you're it's almost like safe exploration into taboo territory. You're like, no, the consequences are only because of social constructs. And so it's this idea of code switching. I joke around and think, I've always said I think teachers curse more than the average group of individuals, and we curse more when we're with our kind. So what happens is you go to the teacher lounge or you go to grab a drink on a Friday after work, and you get together. And
that's what they say. That's the whole phrase. He's got a mouth like a teacher.
You got a mouth. Yeah, mouth like a teacher. That's it.
I've heard that before.
But what I've realized is, and you'll even hear people say like, "Oh, I don't trust someone who won't curse, or I don't trust someone who won't have a drink, or just silly little things. But
Yeah.
what I think they're trying to say is like, all right, look, we're now not away. We're away from students. Hell yeah, it's like us. And so welcome to the team. And so you curse as a, we're away from the kids and I like you. You know, like we have a bond. It's a little bit of a bond to get together and just curse up a storm, and it feels special. It's almost Pavlovian. You know, you're like, yeah, it's Friday. I'm cursing with my colleagues and friends, and kids do the same thing. Kids like, so we come together. We have academic discussions. We polish up our language, and I have my tie on, and like we're all together, and it's healthy, by the way, and it's still sincere, and it's still true. It's just time to code switch, and that
Sure.
skill is valuable. Like, because when you go to work, you're not the same as when you go home or with your friend. And so I've grown increasingly comfortable that, like, okay, well, how I behave in a family, there's not disharmony because I'm behaving differently. I just
Right.
understand these roles, and like I don't want to. I find it refreshing to be around my parents or like at a Christmas dinner with a bunch of relatives, and like it's fairly wholesome. I like wholesome activities. So yeah.
Okay, so that's fine. That's all well and good. But what I really want to hone in on is the difficult situations when these worlds do collide.
Yes.
So I completely agree with you that we keep separate worlds and we code switch between them. That just seems like natural human behavior.
I just wanted to
And we
lay that groundwork as to why it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable, though.
Totally.
So
Yeah.
if all of a sudden, if I'm used to my friends
Yeah.
and I behave a certain way, and then they come around my parents, then I'm not sure which code to adhere
Exactly.
to, and
Which
what if my
one do you
friend
stick to?
violates? Yeah. So if
Right,
cursing,
right.
to me, it's a really clear. Look, if there's cursors and non-cursors, like then. And people might disagree with this, but like we should probably not curse like when we're in the same group together, because it's not offensive to not curse, but it is offensive to curse. So
Yeah, sure. The cost benefit analysis. The cost of not cursing is nothing. The cost of cursing is something, and so you're
Yes.
going to come out negative.
So in that situation, though, I don't say to my friends or something, theoretically anyway, don't curse or tell dirty jokes. Like, I hope that they pick up on social cues and stuff. So then they
Right.
get together and maybe they do test those waters. Maybe they do curse around their parents. I don't know. And not that I don't curse around them, by the way. That was kind of a, but I don't. Well, I don't curse a lot.
I mean, cursing,
anyway, I guess.
cursing,
Like,
cursing is a specific example to represent a broader set of activities.
Yes.
Like, obviously, you don't behave exactly the same around your parents as
Yeah.
you do around your friends. Like, I mean, I know that when we hang out away from your parents, you're doing drugs and you're like robbing cars and shooting cancer
flipping
lasers,
the birds,
everything.
shooting cancer
Yeah.
lasers at strangers, babies, and stuff. Yeah.
All kinds of stuff. So I'm aware that you have different codes and you switch and all of that stuff. So we don't have to go there, but we're just using cursing as a stand-in for all
Right.
of that morally
That's-
degenerate stuff that you do.
It's not morally degenerate even. I don't want to confuse. That's actually important though. Like just like
Right,
like,
sure. Yeah, you're right.
No, but like if I'm
It's
around
simply
my
different behavior.
yeah,
that's
just
all.
different behavior. So it could be like a book club.
It could
who
even
just
be
discusses
like
books.
more or less outgoing. Like in some instances, you may let others take the lead and speak more, and in another circle, you may be the leader. I mean, this seems to be applicable to you in the classroom versus a situation in which you may not be an expert.
Which is interesting because I think we are all awkward. It's just depending on what the situation is. Every single human doesn't thrive socially in every social situation. There's so many dynamics. So like in a classroom,
Not so fast.
speak for yourself. No, so like take me in the classroom where I'm comfortable and I have good dynamics with my class. Let's assume I do for the sake of the argument, and like things are kicking and I'm very like they would perceive me as a socially savvy individual, then place me at like a Christmas party or something with a bunch of people. I can be a lot more awkward and not know how to navigate that. So it just depends on that situation. So and even in that situation, at least it's clear it's Christmas party. Be your Christmas party self. And I just don't know who that happens to be. I haven't refined that. But it's just more confusing. The world's colliding, which is the whole discussion. It's like, all right, well, I got my friends in the same room as my parents, as the same room as like my girlfriend. And like, so I have all these behaviors. Like you can imagine, and it is true, like with me and my girlfriend, like there's the romantic aspect. So everyone has to negotiate this in a relationship. Like, okay, we have our romantic like behavior and how we exist. So to what extent, like it's PDA, public displays of affection. How much are we like going to do that when we're around other people? And what are we comfortable with? So,
and it's funny how little of that is explicitly discussed.
Oh yeah,
And how
like
much
it's
is just
frequently
intuited.
not.
Like
Yes.
you just do it.
And then there's the like, frankly, with guys and your guy friends. To me, it's like, all right. So if do you talk about past romances or how hot that girl that just walked by is or something like that? Like stuff that's a
Right.
little taboo, and like you don't disrespect your girlfriend by doing that. And then there's the, well, I mean, maybe she's cool with that, and how cool is that? Like it's just a really, so the thing about a girlfriend in particular is that your girlfriend is with you frequently,
Also,
so they come
depends
into
on
all your
what time of
worlds.
month it is.
Okay.
Oh, he just went there.
And
I'm also single, by the way. Not surprising.
But in a romantic relationship, you take your partner and you are actually like, you said, okay, well, our world is like almost singular now in a lot of ways. Like you should have time for like, friends that of course you're not one, and that's silly to say you're one, but like if you're living together or you're like, so your social circles are going to have a lot of overlap and travel.
Eventually,
So
the worlds collide enough that they merge.
Yeah.
Somewhat.
And so then that question is like, well, how do you navigate those behaviors? And then like there's you and I, like we love B movies, and that's pretty much, it's a one world. No one else is in.
That's true.
It's just you and me, man. And like I can't expect most people to love that, and nor do I care if they do. I don't need them to love it either. So if you and I get together and want to watch 10 B movies in a row, and my girlfriend's in like here too, like how do you respectfully navigate, hey, this is B movie time, and a good girlfriend, and she's awesome about this, will just be like, yeah, go do that doesn't bother me at all, I'm just going to go do my own thing. And that's a healthy relationship. There's no dependency in that way. It has to be navigated though, right? Like whether it's a romantic relationship or other, like you have a party and you have multiple friends, you have the people from your book club, and you have your colleagues, and you have your best friend, and then you have your friend that you grew up with but you're not quite as close anymore. Like you can imagine a birthday party, and that's like, or a wedding or something. So
recall this situation, a real situation that you and I had. Do you remember, I think it was in 7th or 8th grade or something, there was we played paintball, and you and I went to we went to different schools at that point in middle school. And so I had some new friends, and then you were one of my old friends from my previous school.
Yes.
And there was a paintball party, and I invited you to come. And so it was you and me and 2 of my new friends, and we were in this other place, one of their like campers or something out in the woods.
Yes.
And it was a very strange situation of worlds colliding. It was for both of us, right?
Oh,
because
yeah, definitely.
You and these 2 new friends had never met each other, and paintball was a weird sort of setting for this. And I remember it just being a very strange experience.
It's funny you say that. It's a very vague experience, but also I remember being fairly miserable, and I don't know if I judged them immediately or they judged me, but like we weren't meshing particularly well, but not enough to be like a downright ugly or anything, but just like a pretty much like we're not forming new friendships in super healthy ways as the days unfold, and we're not laughing and telling jokes together. It was just like there was friction or something.
Right. Well, I actually think the reason is because it was an immature attempt, or just like when you're immature, you don't know how to deal with worlds colliding, and you're bad at it. And so an easy way to deal with worlds colliding when you're a kid is to just pick a world and ostracise one
reject
world.
the other world. Yeah.
Right. That's an easy way to do it. That's not exactly what happened with us.
No.
But that is a way to accomplish it. And I think that the reason why it was so strange, aside from the whole, you're not a big fan of paintball, and so, that complicated things. But even for me, I love paintball, and, I was friends with both sets of people. Even I found it to be an awkward situation. And I think it was just because I didn't know how to navigate these two worlds. I had a different friendship with you than I did with these other people. And so having those worlds collide was really strange, and I didn't know how to navigate it. And in fact, actually being completely honest, if there was some strange kind of reunion in which you and me and these two guys got back together again, I think it would be just as awkward now.
Well, yeah, a lot of things, like, we probably just weren't, maybe there weren't enough interests, because if I was all on board on paintball, and especially when you're younger, that would command some respect from them. If they're great and I'm great, and then we're just like talking about paintball guns and whatever, then great, we just have this sort of commonality. But like if I was a little iffy on the paintball, and maybe they were, my memory, and this might not be accurate, but they were a little rougher, tougher, like outdoorsy, and I just wasn't, so I felt immediately othered. And I think they sensed like I don't give off that vibe, and they're just kind of like, oh, he's a little different, and that just, they decided to sort of, politely reject that world, and I don't think I was wanting in either. And so, and then your role is the glue. You are the world colliding. You're like the point. So your job is difficult in those situations, that like you have, I think, some duty to be like, there's obvious introductions, but then also you got to check on me and check on them, and like play both worlds and merge them smoothly.
Yeah.
Like
that's
very
my
difficult.
situation is the most difficult because I have to deal with both of these worlds afterwards.
Right.
It was still worlds colliding for you, but one of these worlds was totally foreign, and you don't care what happens to it.
Right.
And so even though it was awkward in that situation, there were no consequences for you. For me, I had to deal with both worlds, and so that's really the most interesting thing to examine, is how do you navigate a situation in which two worlds that you're going to have to deal with going forward are colliding.
And I've actually seen some strategies that work pretty well, or at least to me, is a couple of things. Like, you have to sort of accept that your role is blending worlds. So that means there's a little more showmanship and pageantry that's just like, look, you're going to be a big, you're kind of, people are going to look to you to help us navigate the worlds, right? Like, whoever the person is, you in this situation, it's like, it's not your job, because it's still people are people, and they have some job to be social and polite and nice and all that, but they're looking to you as the social glue. And so go ahead and own that role. To me, like, the best way to do it is to sort of play that role, and then, like, if you can, you either pick on yourself, or if one of the parties makes fun of you, then the other party forms a bond with that party and going, yeah, and like make fun of them, and so they get to be some butt of jokes, and that sort of, because look, at that moment, the connection is you, that individual, so you need to sort of pick on yourself, or does that make any sense?
No, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's a good strategy for smoothing things over, but I also think it's highly situation dependent, depending on which worlds are colliding, whether you have the opportunity to use these strategies or not.
I mean, yeah, but I've just seen it work pretty well. Sure. Where I, like, especially that, like, if I am party A and I'm introducing B and C, B like kind of winks and nods at C as they tease me, party A, and it just like relieves. It's humor. It's something that hopefully both parties B and C have noticed about party A, and it just unfolds smoothly, and it is social lubricant. It's humor as social lubricant. Yeah.
Sure. Like, what?
By the way, don't use the word social lubricant in as a classroom. I use that in AP Lang, and they just couldn't get over me saying social lubricant. That's not a good term for high school.
That's a good phrase.
I know. I was talking about humor as a social lubricant, and they just were grinning and laughing and made fun of me for a while. That became a thing, as they'd be like, "Ooh, I think this is social lubricant." Like, they just used it way too much. It was funny. They killed the joke, but it was funny.
Yeah. I think that this becomes especially difficult when there are different expectations from the different worlds. So, we've kind of hammered this point already, but when you're around friends, you are very boisterous and joking, and when you're around maybe your church group, you are reserved and polite, and for whatever reason, you go on some kind of church trip and bring your friends along. I don't know. This is just coming to me. Like, that's going to be an awkward situation because there are expectations on you from both groups.
Right.
And so, like, the strategy that occurs to me as the best is, like, you got to take a lowest common denominator approach. So it's kind of like with the cursing, you're just not going to curse because that doesn't cost anything. So it's almost a lose-lose situation for you because you have to behave as 75% Daniel with your friend group and 75% Daniel with your church group. Like,
And
you
you
just have to
can't
tone yourself down to your basic parts.
Be the most agreeable milk toast.
Yeah, like if we all have some core of ourself that our core personality, our core beliefs, our core habits and behaviors, and then with certain groups we get brave and we step outside of those bounds and we experiment and we test our limits, and that's how you behave in different worlds. But when the worlds collide, now you can't step out of these bounds in one direction or the other because you may step on someone's toes. So now you're just not stepping outside of any bounds, and you're just cutting yourself down to your core and behaving that way. Which both groups may notice. Your friends may be like, "Hey, I notice you're not talking very much. Like, something wrong?" They may even be kind of annoyed about it. And your church group may be like, I don't know what they would say. "I noticed you weren't as virtuous." I don't know. I don't know what they would say. But you didn't offer to lead the prayer.
Right. Or if you're a leader in your friend group and more of a follower in your church group, and now your roles are like, crap, what am I doing? Am I leading or following? And that's a simplistic way of saying, what is my role?
And it may be easy to make a mistake, like where you're in that world collision situation and you, for a moment, you step into the friend world and you make a joke, even if it's not a dirty joke or anything, but you speak up and it shocks one group because, whoa, didn't expect to hear something from you,
Right.
Whereas it seems normal to your friends, and that's just a really hard situation to navigate.
It's no wonder people don't like world colliding moments. It's just, I mean, when it goes well, and it's fine. But yeah, it's no matter what the case, you do behave different in different relationships, and that's normal and natural. And so as they come together in the same room and your roles are mixed now, you don't know what that concoction's going to be. You don't know what you're dealing with. Like, what will this reveal about yourself? You might not even be that sure.
Yeah.
So
I had a thought when I was thinking about this topic, and I wondered, and this may be different for you and I, but is simply having guests to your home a world collision situation? Like, not guests from two different groups, just having any guests in your home. But is your home a world, and then when your interaction with guests another world, and is that a collision?
That's interesting to say. I mean, yeah, of course, in some sense, the physical space, of course, is a world, and you behave in that world. Like, presumably, your guard is down in your world. You exist, like, you take your shirt off and walk around the house or whatever. You put your feet up on the table. You might even, like, do things you wouldn't want people to know. Maybe you clip your toenail. Maybe you, like, bite your toenails. Maybe you do some little idiosyncrasies that you don't project to other people. And all of a sudden, when you have a guest, you're amending that behavior because you know, like, what is and isn't socially acceptable. And even if it's not like it's unacceptable. No one's gonna, like, judge you for walking around in your house with your shirt off. No one would. But all of a sudden, if you have a guest, you might not walk around with your shirt off. You may not though. So you're amending your behavior. So yeah, then, and maybe they I don't know, like,
sit in your spot.
That's what I was gonna say. Sit in your spot. They are now occupying space, and you react to their occupation of that space. Of course you do. Like, it's natural to amend your behavior when different things are introduced into your world, including people. So yeah, I think it's yes. So, but now that opens up the definition of, like, now if you have, like, a bar buddy, this person you enjoy chatting with on Friday who's always at that bar, and then now they've come to your house, you might have a different relationship because same just you and that bar buddy, but now you went on a walk with them or you played tennis with them or whatever. Like, now we have a different it's just completely different factors coming into the equation.
All right, so I had another thought on this topic as well. So, is being in some formal situation like a wedding or a graduation or a funeral, obviously there are worlds colliding because of the guests that are there, but even outside of that consideration, is it an example of worlds colliding because the formal situation itself is a tradition? So it is an external past. It's the past, the tradition of the past. It's a separate world colliding with your normal mode of behavior in life. Like, could that explain some of the discomfort that people, like me, experience in formal situations? That it's a worlds colliding, even though there's not necessarily any people inherent to the formal situation.
So you're outside of the fact that, yeah, it might be a lot of relatives and friends celebrating you and family members
Right.
and whatever. So, well, first of all, the rites of passage, I think is what you're saying. These markers that indicate we're now married, or I'm now graduating, or I now have this diploma, or I am now a member of this community, right? Is that what these are markers?
Well, I'm just saying, like even imagine that, imagine that. So let's imagine a bachelor party situation, because this is something that we've actually had, and so that's one world. Like the friends, the bachelor party friends are one world. There should not be any worlds colliding there. But because it's a bachelor party, there are certain expectations and traditions that are carried out that are abnormal, and those traditions make up a separate world that, even though you're already with friends and there shouldn't be any conflict, there are worlds colliding. There's your normal behavior, and then there are these imposed traditions. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. In addition to, like, obviously, if you're just going to invite your school, like, childhood best friends and
not considering those. That's obvious world colliding.
Well, these are also markers. Yeah, you're right. But they're also markers that, like, you're transitioning from one world to another, and whether it's single life to married. And so, like, and then I think as a society, we sort of, like, marriages, bachelor parties, graduations, these are also, they're their own worlds, right? Like, we know this, so we have expectations of, it's probably going to be a group of guys that might not all know each other, or it's probably going to be a bunch of relatives and family members and friends, and, like, we sort of, with its own code of conduct, like, that exists outside of, like, there's not, like, yeah, there's societal pressures. I don't know if that's really worlds colliding, or if it's like, oh, step into this world, and that's going to be a little, like, you don't know what a bachelor party is like until you're in it, like,
right.
Maybe, and there probably are some people that love bachelor parties. All their friends have been getting married, so they're sort of familiar with the world, and, like, you're maybe going to your first bachelor party, and so that person might operate differently within that world. But either way, it's its own set of cultural expectations, and so it's a collision of sorts, I guess.
It's a collision of sorts. I wasn't sure if it was worlds colliding.
I don't know if it's a collision, then maybe it's not. Maybe it's not a collision.
The reason I thought of it is because I was recalling a situation where I went to a funeral of a family member a few years ago, and I found it really strange because, like, I already had, I have relationships with these family members at the funeral, but obviously you're supposed to behave in a different way at a funeral than you do normally. But I was not able to really do that. Like, I just couldn't behave, somber and like sad, and it felt unnatural. It felt wrong, actually. It felt disharmonious to behave in that way. But I felt like I'm in funeral world, and here I am in my, I also have a world built with these family members, and these two things are now in conflict, and I don't know which one to choose. And obviously, again, I'm resistant to change, so I defaulted to my normal interaction with my family members. Who knows whether they thought, Bennett's acting unusually chipper at this funeral, but, like, that's how I was acting.
Well,
and it felt like worlds colliding. It felt like a situation like the paintball party or something.
I mean, I don't know if it's a collision of worlds or just a series of expectations. We have, like, for instance, grief. Like, funerals and grief go hand in hand, and, like, there are expectations. Grief looks like your head down. Grief looks like crying. Grief looks like X, Y, and Z, and we don't always like that's just kind of a stereotype, I guess, and grief doesn't always look that way, and you might not feel it in the same way. And so that you are recognizing those cultural expectations, or grief looks like X, Y, and Z, but your grief might have looked like A, B, and C, and so you're like, you're recognizing you're not adhering to these sort of social norms within this world. And I mean, I think it's a stretch though well, it is a world, but I really just think it's a yeah, it's fair to say a world or a social construct or a series of expectations. I mean, I'm just using those three things interchangeably almost. And so it's not a collision of your normal world and like funeral world as much as it is like of normal behavior or your feeling and then the expectations of how you should display that feeling. Or maybe you don't even like, I think you could experience grief without it being like some heavy sadness. Maybe you could like think fondly of that family member who passed, you know, and like you'd be like kind of grinning at some of the old childhood memories of that person, and
Sure.
like people go like, "Wow, why are you?" But then at the same time, people will always say, "But it's a celebration of life, not a." And so like, what if you actually did feel celebratory, truly not in any twisted way, actually a pretty healthy like. I'm just feeling so much appreciation for this person, man. I mean, I think it has to have some sadness, right? Because they're gone, and like that just is inherently sad, I think. But I think you could have an overwhelming sense of joy and feel a little weird about that, or at least not feel as strongly as you've been, like. I mean, the underpinning here is like that everyone's assuming you feel something strongly, and maybe you don't feel the degree to which you feel you should, and that feels like your internal harmony and the external harmony, like what would be harmonious, is just not coexisting. And so that feels, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you fake crying, you've created external harmony, or not crying, but grief in whatever forms they see fit, but you're
Right.
not being harmonious. Now, if you act harmoniously, then you're going to pay some price, possibly socially.
Well, that's why I drew the similarity, because it seems like when worlds collide, you basically lose. Like there is no coming out of that situation better than better than your normal behavior with either one of the groups individually.
Yeah.
Like something's got to give in there, and that's what it seemed like for the funeral situation as well. So.
Well, what's weird a thought for me though is like, as I think I maybe growing increasingly empathetic or sympathetic, or I think empathetic, and it could look like, I mean, it would be kind of easy to say, well, Daniel, you're not standing to your principles, and you're around someone who feels this way or has these beliefs, and you're sort of mirroring that. And I don't know that it's as simple as saying I'm abandoning principles, as more as I have an array of principles and thoughts, and I can like emphasize different ones at different times. In the same way we code switch. Like, so for me, if I'm at a funeral and I don't feel like lowering my head, but I know it will make a lot of people feel better, or at least like I don't see it as abandoning myself to lower my head. And I'm not trying to just justify that. I'm saying it actually feels right to sort of, I'm supporting in a weird way, like I'm helping in a small way. I'm not saying it's significant, but neither is lowering your head. That's not some significant gesture, but it might like play to their expectations and help them through their time of grief. And like I just don't, like, I don't feel disharmonious there. Although it's easy to interpret, I think, as going, well, look at Daniel, he's fake bowing his head or something. Like, I don't feel fake about it, even though wouldn't normally. Is that strange to say? Like I'm doing something that isn't my natural state, but yet it doesn't feel unnatural. So.
Yeah, no, I think it is strange to say, and I'm not sure I'm on board with it 100%. Like, something just rubs me the wrong way about submitting your own natural, your own behavior to group behavior without clear reason. Now, the situation you outlined, maybe there's some little bit of reason if you don't want to cause a disruption.
Yeah, maybe
for
it's
example,
a cost-benefit analysis. If I don't
fine,
feel like putting an arm around this person, but it would make them feel better more than it would make me uncomfortable, I'm going to do it. I'm going to put my arm around them.
But I think I have a fundamental distaste for disharmony, and I think you do too. Mm-hmm. Maybe people have different tolerance levels for disharmony. But one of the questions I was going to ask you kind of at the end of this topic is is it a noble goal to strive for such harmony that no matter what worlds you have, no matter which worlds collide, you're still harmonious. You're still acting as yourself. Like, is that a noble goal, or is it actually a better goal to beef up your code switching skills and be able to cater? Is it a strength of? Would it be a strength to be able to cater to different groups, or would it be a strength to be an unchangeable person who doesn't have to change for different groups?
I mean, I think if we're talking in the abstract and idealistically, then the absolute self-harmony and you are not catering at all it's a rock solid idealist view. Like, I can't poke holes in it because it plays out logically. It just like, why would you not want to be completely harmonious? Like, any arguments otherwise that sound a little bit silly. And the code switching one sounds dangerously close to abandoning, yourself in some way. But I guess I want to try to justify my thought earlier for a moment is like, I don't feel let's say I'm in a grief situation, someone's died, I'm, at a funeral or whatever. And like, I don't feel like I have a heavy stake. Possibly, I don't feel like a huge stake in whatever. Maybe it's just like a relative that I didn't know particularly well. Now, if I had a huge stake, if it was like someone I loved dearly and was super close with, I might have to take my principled stand, and then I need to, right? Because this means a lot to me. But if it doesn't mean that much to me, then code switching could both benefit me and others more. Lowering my head and like amending my behavior. I'm not abandoning a sense of self. I'm just kind of doing a cost benefit analysis, and it's better for everyone, including myself, if I do it. And so I think there's actual humility in that. Like, it seems to me to not be very humble to say like, no, I'm not yielding. I will not yield for others. I mean, that's essentially what this seeking out harmony could be construed as. That's the ungracious interpretation.
Right. Well,
I will not yield versus I will.
Well, so that's a very good attack on the the harmony angle. But let me present to you this. You've probably heard of the very common psychological phenomenon of the bystander effect. Where someone is getting murdered or robbed or something, and there's a crowd of people, and no one will take the first step. No one will go to help or call the police or whatever because no one else is. No one is the leader.
Diffusion of responsibility. Yeah,
exactly. Diffusion of responsibility. I think there's some sort of link. Obviously, these are two wildly different scenarios. But to me, like I agree that there are situations in which adhering very strongly to your own sense of harmony could be a selfish thing to do. But I also think that in other situations, you have a responsibility to yourself, because you are most knowledgeable about yourself. You're less knowledgeable about the people around you. So if you have to make a calculated decision on harmony, you're going to know how to handle yourself better than you're going to know how to handle the other people around you. So when in uncertain times, rely on yourself, rely on your principles and your beliefs and your habits and who you are, and make your principled stand, make your harmonious stand. And that just seems like the way to go. Obviously, again, like, I completely agree, cost benefit analysis, like, if you're in a situation so trivial that it's, bow your head or don't bow your head, then the risks are minimal, and it doesn't really matter if you make your stand or don't make your even talking about it as making your stand is kind of silly. But like, imagine that it was something that would cause you some discomfort. Like, imagine it was an open casket for a somewhat distant relative, and the family wanted everyone to come up and kiss the open casket relative on the lips and say a personal goodbye into the microphone.
Yeah.
Like, that's an uncomfortable situation. And if you don't really even know this relative very well, then now do you fall in with the herd, or do you step out to go to the bathroom, when it's your turn?
Okay. I had a good thought. Let me see if I can get this so forgive me if I fumble my way through it, but like when we talk about harmony and how we should align ourselves to exist, harmoniously, I think we need to think about three things. We should strive for harmony when it comes to morality, mental health, and perhaps a sense of duty. I'm just throwing out these three categories, but I want to play with it for a second. Morality, mental health, and sense of duty.
Okay.
So because I don't want to abandon moral principles. I think it's really important to have a sense of self with regards to morality, and that's one of the most important things to hone over time. And so that's any seeking harmony in that category is like absolutely a must. Also, mental health, if you feel like it's going to truly drive you crazy or be like just plague you, like in some ways, perhaps kissing kissing the dead body might actually freak you out. Seriously, then you probably shouldn't do that. Then there's like a sense of duty, which probably coincides with morality, but like the thing you kind of ought to do toward like your partner,
So maybe,
or, I don't know.
maybe even social expectation rather than duty.
I think it's important to say duty then instead of just a social expectation, because we could define them, but when it comes to like, okay, so they've presented you with something that's uncomfortable, like I don't think being a little bit internally disharmonious is a big deal unless you're violating your moral code, you're doing something that's going to plague your mental health or violate some sense of duty like in a major way. So I think we should push ourselves to maybe be uncomfortable and maybe kiss that. If kissing that body would make them so happy and it would make me just uncomfortable, I need to ask, how uncomfortable am I? If it's off the charts to the point of mental health, then I think it's a reasonable thing to say no. If I have some greater belief about bodies shouldn't be touched, I don't know, then we're in the moral territory. But I really think I want to like examine why don't I amend myself for others, and those three seem to be pretty good reasons. In other words, like I would push myself to, yeah, sure, code switch the hell out of everything as long as I'm not abandoning some real core principles, and those are kind of the three core principles that I just came up with on the spot.
I like the way
it might be stupid, but.
Yeah, I like the way you frame it, and I like your three choices, but something about it, I don't know, maybe this is just me being stubborn, but something about bowing to other people's expectations, I don't like it. Like,
but let's take an innocuous example. Okay, go ahead, sorry.
So, like, I mean, I'm just imagining a situation in which maybe I'm with a new group of coworkers, or maybe this is some kind of, like, maybe it's a girlfriend and I'm with her friends. They have some valued tradition where you take a shot of pickle juice or something, and it's an important tradition. I don't know why this would be the case, and I am somehow roped into this situation, and I abhor pickles and I hate pickle juice, and like, it would be a social expectation for me to take part. If I don't take part, my girlfriend's going to be annoyed with me. The friends are going to think less of me. But I don't like freaking pickle juice, and I don't want to bow to the expectations to take a shot of pickle juice. In fact, I almost think that by saying, no thanks, I don't like pickle juice, I now convey very clearly, more clearly, who I am and what I'm willing to do in a situation. And I wonder if, even though I experience some negative blowback from my denial, short term, if long term, I don't actually gain something. Like, maybe they're annoyed with me in the moment, but over the long term, they learn, well, that's Bennett. He's not going to do something he doesn't want to do. Like, he's not going to be pressured into something.
There is that.
Even if it's something innocuous like pickles. And again, this actually reminds me of cursing in middle school. I didn't curse in middle school, and by the time I made it to high school, like, people, like, I didn't get any pushback on that. People were just like, oh, I know who Bennett is. They knew what to expect from me, and they valued my consistency in a way.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you pay those social prices, and then it evens out. So like, maybe you probably paid a social cost for being sort of the unusual kid who wouldn't curse, or in this case, like, all right, they're not going to push you to do those pickleback shots or whatever. They're just not going to do it, and like, you miss out on this sort of chance to it, bond socially, but like that's okay too. They also know where you stand, and so your interactions are going to be less likely to involve asking, pushing you to do things you don't want to do. I mean, you could see a scenario in which like you playfully were like, well, I hate this, but you guys are so much fun, I'm going to do something I hate just because you guys are awesome. And then like you now are doing something you don't like, and you may have gained something there too. But the cost being they're going to, next time you say, no, I'm not doing that, they think it's a negotiation, which could be annoying. It could be annoying. I mean, I was just thinking like, let me throw another scenario out there. So like maybe you're an avowed hater of chick flicks. You hate chick flicks, and now your girlfriend loves them, and they are all getting together, and they want to like, come on, Bennett, let's watch chick flicks. And this group, they love to get there and watch their chick flicks. Like you can do and they get together annually. It's not like chick flick of the club of the month, because I think that'd be a bad position to put yourself into. But if they're doing it like once a year, and they're gonna watch 3 chick flicks, and like, so you could do one thing and say, I am the kind of human being who, in the name of harmony, I'm gonna tell them how stupid chick flicks are,
right?
or
That sounds
avoid the
reasonable.
situation. Well, yeah, or you like say like, you could even playfully say how like you don't like them, but again, the sort of, but I like you guys enough to do something I don't want to do, or you just don't ever even tell them that, and you just do it. The chick flick thing doesn't make the morality cut, or the mental health cut, or the sense of duty cut. So I think like so my decision is at least going, this is I don't feel the need anyway, some compelling sense of harmony fueling me to go, you need to understand, well, now if it could be morality if I really thought these were so sexist and like played into like cartoonish caricatures of men or something like that, and like I could see a moral, abhorrence of chick flicks or something like that. But that's getting a little silly, I think, and obnoxious. We'd have to understand that we come across a little silly if you're taking some giant moral stand on a genre of crappy movies or something.
Sure.
Anyway, my point is like I'm just more willing to adhere to the group in the name of social like bonding and like helping or giving or just developing the relationship. I would prioritize the relationship over harmony if it doesn't ask me to violate these certain categories. And I don't think I'm losing a sense of self. I'm just saying that, look, my values aren't
See, I
I'm
think
just trying
that-
to humble myself to say that values don't extend to like preferences of movies or something like that.
Maybe. I mean, maybe. Values, no. But if you, like, I would tell you my response in that situation, if I had a girlfriend and she wanted me to watch 3 chick flicks with her and her girlfriends, which sounds horrendous, by the way. That sounds awful. I would say, that sounds horrendous. That sounds awful. And I might even go and I would make fun of the movies the whole time. And that's what I would do. Like, that's how I would cope with being in such a detestable situation, is make fun of the movies the whole time. They may think that's funny. They may think that it's annoying. Both are equally likely. Maybe one is more likely than the other. But
Yeah.
they are going to know more who I am. And in the future, they're going to know what to expect from me. Like, I'm either not going to get another invitation to the chick flick party, which is fine by me, or, like, imagine I had decided to bow to group will and just go pleasantly, then I may now have future invites to this chick flick watching party that, because I've set a precedent, I'm expected to follow through with. And now I've got myself into more bad situations. Whereas if I had just been harmonious at the start, not necessarily even saying I have to be rude or say, you guys shouldn't like these stupid movies.
Right.
Obviously, I'm not saying that. But, like, by being harmonious, by being true to myself and giving my honest opinion on the matter, then I don't have to do any future maintenance. Like, there's no maintenance that has to be done going down the line.
Right. But I mean, I think the cost is not kind of a zero-sum game. It's not like, oh, if I say no to the chick flick things, then I don't get invited to chick flick things. That's all. Like, I am turning away from an offer of a relationship to some degree. Like, it's not just this isolated thing. It's like, okay, oh, well, he doesn't like this thing I like. Like it starts to form relationships. So just want to point out that even though it's harmonious, like the cost isn't just as simple as saying, oh, that means no more chick flick invites and that is it. I do think that there are ramifications. Hard to measure, by the way, very vague and a little uncomfortable. Like it's not clear cut what the ramifications are. But if you continue to say, no, I hate your pickle shots. No, I hate your chick flick nights. No, I think depending on how strongly, by the way, like I think you could just say, chick flicks aren't my thing, but I just don't mind hanging out with you guys or something for an evening. Like I still think you could voice your preference, and then it's really dependent on how strong your preferences are, how big of a stand you should make. And I guess that's what I wanted to say is like my preferences have. I don't feel as strongly about my preferences as I do about my values. And that's the takeaway that like identity to me is tied to values, and harmony should be tied to values, not preferences. So if it's like these like preference area stuff, I'm just a lot more willing to be a chameleon or just playfully say, yeah, it's not my thing, but hey, I'll just go for it, because it doesn't make me miserable to engage in like things that aren't up to my preference. Whereas it would be, I think, almost immoral to adhere to things that go against my values or my identity in that regard. So,
Yeah, well, I'm not going to disagree with you there. Obviously, values are more important than preferences, but I wonder if there isn't some tenuous connection between values and preferences, and if there is some point at which you sacrifice your preferences so consistently that it actually becomes a value issue.
I could see that being that's the danger of going along with the crowd, is that I might be my identity and therefore values could become malleable. And like, so what I admire about harmony is this sort of this adherence to a principled values. That is such an admirable thing. Why would we not want to hone that and make that more acute and exact? And we should know who we are. Like we should refine ourselves, not just always shift and change with whatever happens to be popular at the time. Like that's obnoxious, and there's no principled stand there. So like I don't want to. I'm really pushing to be devil's advocate. I also want to push to. I agree with what I'm saying. I tend to, like, I think it plays out in our behaviors, yours and mine specifically. Like, I'm more willing to just sort of, I am more susceptible to groupthink is one of the downsides of it. I'm more susceptible to, but I'm also like more likely to have like more new experiences and like, so, there's like a cost and benefit, but like I don't want to lose my sense of like morality or values, and that is something you should be aware of if you're going to go along with things more often. So
definitely,
it really
and like
is not.
I think this is an interesting topic because I do think we differ on it, and I don't think either of us would change our behaviors. I mean, we kind of choose our behaviors in this realm, and both decisions have their pros and cons.
I appreciate the refinement, because you and I have talked about harmony and disharmony for years, and I felt like this discussion has helped me understand a little bit more nuanced of like, well, harmony can be all encompassing, but I think it's important to distinguish between values and preferences. But then like your pushback is valid too, is like, well, preferences maybe stem from values, or at least like how do we develop preferences? I mean, some things like taste seem to be sort of weirdly innate, right? Like you're not just, the reason you don't like pickles isn't some pickled like trauma you had as a kid. You just don't like them, and you're not going to like them, or it's not likely anyway. Versus maybe chick flicks do have some moral underpinning. Maybe they really do rub us the wrong way because they intentionally produce sort of vapid, cartoonish caricatures of men and women and sort of romanticize relationships in harmful ways, and that creates a distaste. And so you don't prefer chick flicks, but really there's a moral underpinning. So yeah, what is the relationship between preferences and values is huge. But I think it's important to say that there are some major differences, and and what are we striving for, like, and what do we value? Yeah.
I do want to mention that I tried looking for some research in this area, because I figured someone is bound to have studied this, and I didn't turn up too much, but I did find a paper that in a psychology journal that was kind of interesting, where they tried to carry out some experiments to test worlds colliding, and what they did is they used undergrad students, but there was one where they told a pair of students, okay, student A, you are going to act like a party animal, and student B, you're just going to have a conversation with this party animal, student A. And then in another conversation, they're going to get student A, who was the party animal, and they're going to say, okay, in this conversation, you have to act like a nerd, and student C, who they're talking with, is just going to have a normal conversation with them. And then in a third conversation, they put all three together, and the student A had to try to balance those roles, and then they measured, the opinions of all three people in the conversation. And that was how they attempted to simulate this worlds colliding situation. I thought it was kind of an interesting setup. Obviously fraught with problems.
But like they have the role playing play out. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the closest I could find. The paper tended to focus a lot on people's confidence in their ability to balance these situations, and kind of the result was they found that people tend to overvalue their ability to balance these two worlds. Like when they interviewed the students afterwards, they thought they did a better job of acting than they actually did. And they actually did a second experiment that didn't quite seem like worlds colliding to me, where it was basically a secret word game where you have a group of familiar group. You get to talk with them a little bit beforehand, and you have an essay that you have to read, and you have to somehow convey to that familiar group what your secret word is, while another group also listening. You can't let slip what your secret word is to them, and all you can do is read the essay. So that one was kind of interesting as well. But and no need to dig down into either of those. I just thought, it was interesting that this is something that I think lots of people deal with, and it's psychologically interesting, and it doesn't seem like there has been an abundance of study on it. Some, at least. It was actually nice to find that someone studied this specifically, but I think there's a lot of room for expanding on it.
Agreed. Those attempts sound, to only get at one super small aspect of each of the issue, and so small that, there's a lot of room for growth. I don't know. Easy for me to say, but man, that's interesting that there's been a little bit of research, but not nearly enough in this phenomenon.
Yeah. Well, that about does it for Worlds Colliding. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks for coming to third space.
I think we covered that one pretty well. So.
All right, good. We're continuing the tradition of awkward endings.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks.
Yeah. All right, man. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Third space.